Okay, welcome back. In the last video, we set up a sound effect for our fire, and that sound effect was spatialized, meaning it had a position in 3D space. We can get close to it and hear it get louder, we can move away from it and hear it get softer, we can turn it to the left or right side of the player and hear it actually pan from left to right, that sort of thing. What I'd like to do now is bring in another kind of sound effect, an ambient sound effect. This will be a sound that goes wherever the player goes. You can't get away from it. It'll never change from the left side of your speakers to the right side. It's just always present. There are a few ways to go about doing this. We could place an empty game object somewhere in the level and call it ambient sound and broadcast out the sound in such a way where, one, the player can never get away from it. And I use finger quotes when I say get away from it. You do that by taking the minimum distance for the fall off and setting that so big that you can't ever get out from under it. For instance, if we were to take our fire, which I can do by coming back over here to our flame object, and I had our fire sound. There we go. I was trying to where did I put my fire sound? I really need to parent that over to the flame. So let's just drag this right into the flame. That will lose our connection, but that's perfectly all right. So we'll go ahead and click continue. Now it should be a lot easier to find the fire sound in the future. In any event, if I was to take our minimum distance and set this way up to something like 256 units, then we would never be able to get out from under the minimum distance. Anywhere in this level, we would always hear this at the maximum volume because we're within that minimum radius from the sound effect. And that's one way to go about creating ambient sounds. Now, I don't want to do it that way. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and take this and set it back down. I believe it was at 1 or 0. I'm going to set it back down because what I want to do is go about this in a slightly different manner. What's another way we could do it, Lee?
Well, we could take the audio source and attach it to one of the game objects that follows the person around, so it's always in the same spot as our audio listener.
That's right. We already have some objects that are following the player around, that being the first-person controller. The little graphics capsule, the polygon model is following us around, as well as the main camera itself, which contains our audio listener. And the benefit of doing it this way is that we don't have to worry about that minimum distance. No matter where we go, the audio source is always coming along with us. Now, earlier on, we had mentioned that the audio listener was a lot like your ears into the level. Your audio source is kind of like a speaker. So if you think about having your speaker and your ears in the same spot, it becomes a lot like wearing headphones. So this is a lot like putting headphones onto our player. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. I'm going to start with the main camera, so we'll have that selected from the first-person controller in the hierarchy view. We'll go under the component menu, jump down underneath audio, and choose audio source. Now, this, of course, gives us something that we can use to play a sound, and now we need to bring the sound in. Now, in the previous video, I showed you that you can have a Windows Explorer window and drag and drop sound effects or any kind of asset directly into your project view. So we'll do that one more time. And I'll go ahead and get that window out of the way. And this is a wind blowing sound effect, which you can see came from freeloops.com if you wanted to grab something similar yourself. Now, I'll take this wind sound effect and drag it into the audio clip reference property here in my audio source component, and that's already hooked up. Now, if we wanted to, before we even start playing the game, we can select this little sound effect we brought in, and we can sample it here inside the editor. And that sounds pretty good. It's a little loud, but it still gets the point across. So now let's go back over to the main camera. The only thing I'm going to switch on for now is loop, so that it will continue to play. It'll just start over and keep playing. And let's give this a quick test. And I'm not hearing it, so let's go ahead and I'll just hit stop, and we'll play one more time.
And there we go.
There we go. So now we have the sound of wind around our level. Now there's some changes I'd like to make to it. I think it's maybe a little bit loud. Now there's a trick that I like to do because, I don't know, if you ever need to stop the camera, because sometimes when I'm moving around like this, it gets distracting for me. So I'll get my mouse up here to the title bar for Unity, and then just right click, and that loses focus on the actual gaming viewport. So now I can come over here to the inspector. We're still playing, and I can play with all the settings without the camera following me around. That's just one of those little random tricks you come across. So now let's take our volume and let's pull this down to about 0.25. So the wind has become a whole lot softer. And really, everything else, I'm going to kind of leave in your hands if you'd like to make changes to the sound. You can play with the pitch of it if you want. You could have a much higher pitch wind. So even just by cranking that up to 2, you get kind of that... Actually sounds a little bit colder, strangely.
This kind of wind going off the top of the mountains.
Yeah, the only thing is it sounds a little bit repetitive now because it feels like it's sped up a little bit. So I'm going to put that back down, let's say 1.5 or so. And we'll just go with that. Now, everything else we're not too worried about. Things like pan levels, spread, all of that stuff has to do with the 3D positioning of the sound. And since we can't really get away from it, the 3D position is completely irrelevant. However, I will throw this out there. If for some reason you had a sound effect that you did want to push toward one side of the player or the other, you can come down to the 2D settings and pan this over to the left or right, which is not going to make any difference to you folks on the video because you're not hearing this in stereo. We'll go ahead and leave that kind of set where it is. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to show here, was just getting a sound effect into our level so for the actual wind. Now, there is something missing. What do you think's missing?
Well, if we've got wind, shouldn't things be moving?
That's true. It'd be nice to have some ambient motion in the trees to give a little bit more credence to the wind that we're hearing. So that'll be the next thing that we take care of in the following video. Until then, thanks a lot.